Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and if you've ever had any worries about thermal paste application, whether you're putting too much on or not enough, or you're just a bit clumsy while doing it like I am and maybe you end up with a bit of a mess, then I've got something interesting to show you. And it's not how you can use this little kit to transform your CPU with a ROG logo on top. It's something that I'll get to in a second, which makes life a lot easier. Now, if you get yourself a new AIO like this Ryzen 3 Extreme, chances are you've got pre-applied thermal paste on your cooler, and you can probably get away with just using that and it'll be fine. However, if you've got a new motherboard and you'd like to use something else, then let me recommend Cryo Sheet instead. This is from Thermal Grizzly, and I've purchased it to use in several builds to keep the tests similar, and I'll get to that in a second and show you what I mean, but also just to show how much easier it is to use than thermal paste. This is essentially just a very thin sheet which goes between your CPU and your cooler and replaces the thermal paste, meaning there's far less mess and far less hassle and no worries about overdoing the CPU thermal paste or underdoing it and ended up with not enough. And it will really help with cooling capabilities. Now, this is a very fine sheet that is very delicate, so I would recommend some very careful tweezers when applying it or when handling it because it's very easy to damage, and you'll see that in a second. This is a 38 by 38 size, which is the perfect fit for the i9-14900K, for example, but will also work with Intel's new Core Ultra CPU, so I'm going to use it here with the Core Ultra 9 285K. Which are slightly bigger than the older version, is worth noting. But because it's a square, you can essentially just cut a little sliver of it off and then sit it over the CPU nicely. Now, it is electrically conductive, so you do need to be careful it doesn't touch other things. So as you can see here in its standard format, it's a little bit large left to right on either side of the CPU, so you do need to make sure you trim it a little bit. And that process itself is a little bit fiddly, because you can damage it, and you'll see my incompetence now as we go back in time and see the application on a 14900K. So I ended up buying a new one of these, but you can see I've split it ever so slightly and I dropped some on the motherboard and there was a load of hassle here and faffing. But obviously we're not applying anything direct to the CPU. There's no worry about paste overspill, and there's no worry about getting the wrong amount. As long as you carefully seat your cooler down over the top and don't slip it around while doing so, you should find that that is then sitting in the right place, covering the entirety of the IHS and giving you good thermal conductivity through there and making sure that your CPU runs nice and cool. Now, the reason I use this is one, to demonstrate this, and two, to be able to test out multiple builds inside the Lian Li Vision Compact, because I built in this case with several different components, including Corsair's fans and AIO, NZXT AIO, Lian Li's AIO, and various other builds. So I wanted to be able to show thermal tests and performance in there, but also keep the thermal paste universal. So using the sheet meant that it was always the same amount of thermal conductivity on the CPU, and the only difference would be the fans and the coolers. And as you can see, running Cinebench, the scores here were fairly decent, and the temps didn't get over 90 degrees, which is actually pretty impressive for an i9-14900K. So once that was done, I rebuilt again and used Lian Li's HydraShift all-in-one cooler with the same thermal sheet, so I could run similar tests again, but also to show that it is possible to reuse the thing, although I don't know how it will hold up over a long time, like if you used it for a year and then tried to swap it to a new system. But it is possible to use it multiple times, so I have actually used this in several builds. And as you can see here, when we do a Cinebench run on this one, we're looking at around 89 degrees maximum, averaging about 60 degrees on the P cores. So then some real world gaming as well. So I'm putting it through its paces, testing with various other games as well as benchmarks. Gaming, generally speaking, the CPU is not getting much higher than 60 degrees. And when you're running benchmarks, it can be a little bit higher naturally, as you'd expect, with various different tests in other games. But even with a high-end CPU like the i9, it's still not getting massively hot. You can see here it was 90 degrees at some point, but again, it was averaging like 50 or 60 degrees. And generally speaking, the performance has been really good. Thing here is you don't have to worry about the application being terrible and some cores being hotter than others, we're getting really good temperature scores. It's easy to apply. There's no worries about bubbles or overspill or anything else, and you can reuse it in other systems as well. I used this logic several times with the Lian Li Vision Compact with several different build formats so that I could then review the case and show the thermal performance and give fair tests on it. So I thought while I was doing that, I'd just demonstrate how you could use this in your system and how it might make your life a little bit easier if you choose to do so. If you want to see the review of the case, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what you think. Check out the links in the description to find out more.
You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos. You might well find them interesting or useful. And most importantly, have a great life.